The Rambam we're learning today is Hilchos Psulei mukdashin, and we're going to discuss the second perek Tesvav of Hilchos Psulei mukdashin, Halacha Aleph and Halacha Gimel. The Rambam talks about this. There's various thoughts, machshavas that passel a korban, that negate a korban from being kosher. One is there's pigul, there's similar to pigul, passel, and then there is two thoughts that affect the korban negatively. And that is, if somebody thinks Shalei Lishma, which means he thinks Shinui Hashem, it's called, changes the name of the korban. There are a lot of halachas in each of the cases. I'm just going to give you a very general. Is that somebody thinks that he's being a chatas, and he thinks, I want it to be an eilah. And then there's Shinui Bailim. Shinui Bailim is if he thinks it's if the uncle brings the korban and he thinks it should be for Shmuel or whatever, whoever he thinks about. So the Rambam is addressing those two cases right now. He writes, Kol hazvochem shenishchetu b'machshavas shinui Hashem, bein b'karbanos yochid, bein b'karbanos tzibur, ksherim elo she'olu l'bayil l'shem chayv. That kosher. So if a person thinks either about a different korban at the time, in other words, these shechts for it to be an eilah instead of a shlomim, or he shechts for a different owner, and he writes whether it's karbanos yachid, karbanos tzibur, they remain kosher. You continue bringing the korban, and he goes through in detail, giving you examples when that these apply to, whether somebody changes it b'shas shchita, b'shas kabbalah, b'shas halacha, or zrika. Now he doesn't differentiate between Shinui Hashem and Shinui Bailim in this aspect. Yeah. Now, I'm sorry. Here he said Shinui Hashem. He hasn't spoken about Shinui Bailim. And then he goes out and he says he's called Shinui Hashem, and then he gives examples of Keitzalei Olul Chayva, K'Shachat Eilah L'Shem Shlomim. Person was supposed to bring an eilah, and he was thinking it to be a shlomim, the guy who's shechting or doing any of the other avedus. Lay also eilah. Too bad. And got to bring another korban. It's good. Can be macro of this korban, but it's not eilah mishum. Eilah mishum shlom. Now, note, he spoke about Shinui Hashem, and he's giving another example here, which is v'cheinim shochat oilas Ruben l'shem Shimon. They also loyla Ruben v'loyla Shimon, which is a bit strange. I mean, he didn't talk about Shinui Bailim. He said kol hazoch Shinui Hashem, and I guess so. For this reason, there are achreinim that also wants to say that the word Shinui Hashem is a general term and includes both, which will be negated to later in the Rambam. And then he goes on and he says, now, after giving the two examples, he seems to revert back to Shinui of the Zebach, Shem HaZebach. When he was Eiker, the name of the Zebach, Bizodin, Avalim Tov, Dimash, Zhu Eilah, that this Eilah Shlamimi, and he did all the Avedas Shem Shlamim, it doesn't affect anything because it's Akira B'tois, as he writes. Sha'akira B'tois Eina Akira. Now, why did he revert back to Shem HaZevach? He didn't say, Ma'ad V'Amruim Sheshina Hashem. And give an example is we brought Shimon, Reuven's carbon for the sake of Shimon thinking it's Shimon's. For some strange reason, he does not mention that. Okay, we'll go on. Halacha Gimel. And this is where the most important part of our halachas, but the other part is relevant. It is forbidden to have any non-appropriate thought. In other words, if this is an Eila, I got to think it's an Eila. If it's Reuven's, I got to think Reuven's. If not, it's called Machshava She'ein L'chaim. Leficha. Zevach sheshachtai shalei l'shmai. Now here again, it goes straight to the Zevach. Ay mincha shenikmatza shalei l'shma. Ben bezodain, ben bishgaga. Right? Well, in the Ramdak, he doesn't speak about that. What exactly the Lishma and Lishma was. He just says, "Bein bezadim bein mishgaga chayiv lahashlim shara avodas lishma." Yeah, whether it's zadin, does it intentionally by mistake, he needs to finish the other avodas lishma. And then he gives you a chiddush. Afilu shochat v'kibul v'hoylech v'machshavah shinei Hashem. Even though he did all three avodas that are pre-zrika, Shinei Hashem, chayiv lizruk machshavah l'chaim. Okay, now this Rambam has got a lot of issues that we need to address. Before anything, let's see the Gemara, where the Rambam bases this Halacha Gimel off. The Gemara says the following statement. On the Beis and Zvachim and on the Beis and Menachos, both the same exact piece of Gemara pretty much. The Gemara says, there it talks about Nikmitza. And the Gemara gives you reasons for that. Now, fact the Mishnah Lamelech. A number of questions on. So let's analyze all these the two halachas and go through what various problems that there are from halacha Aleph through halacha Gimel and halacha Gimel. So on halacha Aleph, the Mishnah Lamelech, we noted a little bit about it, but we didn't get into the details. The Mishnah Melech bothered. The Rambam puts Shinui Kodesh, which means Shinui Hashem of the Zevach. Shinui Hashem of the Zevach is Shinui Bail. Okay, Shinui Zevach and Shinui Bail. Let's refer to it from there on that way. Shinui Zevach means Oila L'Shem Shlamim. Shinui Bailim is Ruvain L'Shem Shimon. So he puts them in one category. But the Mishnah Melech says that a study of the Gemara would indicate that by Shinui Bailim, somebody does Shchita L'Shem Shimon. I'm shechting for Shimon's sake. And it's Reuven's garden. So the Mishnah Melech assumes that's no good. That's good. Why? Because the only place the Bailim come to play a role is in the Zrika. Because that's where the kapara is. The rest is not a kapara. It's just preparing, but it's not a kapara. And the Rambam seems to put them in one category, that they're the same thing. You think by Shchita gives a whole list of the list of the Avedas that they passel. Why doesn't he separate and say, wait, Shinui Bailim is different than Shinui Hazevach? So that is the Mishnah Lamelech's question. Now, that's there's another Rambam, which we already had learned, Hilchas Meiser Kabbanis, Perik Dalet Halacha Yud. And it's an important Rambam because it's going to play an important role in our discussion. Kol Hazvachim, Sorich Ha'oiveit Shetia Machshaftoi. There's another thing. We talk about Shinui Hazevach and Shinui Bailim. But the truth is you need 6 thoughts while you're bringing the carbon. And it's not only going against, it's positive thoughts. And those are, The guy who does the avodah has to have shatia machshavte, l'shem hazevach, which is what we've been talking about, l'shem ba'olav, which we've been talking about now, and when b'shas zvicha, b'shas kabbalas adam, b'shas elochas adam, b'shas zvikos elam ezbeh. And he doesn't tell you any details about that. There's a difference between them. And he goes, all Korbanos and so forth. Now that's halacha yud. Just to note that halacha yud aleph, he brings that there are 6 things. During the shechita, you need 6 things. Shemazevach, Shemazevach. That's the next halacha. V'shehazevach laHashem baruch hu, that you're bringing it for God's sake, for the sake of Hashem, or for Hashem. V'sheaktiru le'ishem, I'm going to bring it as a fire offering. Shaktarosay l'reyach b'vad, it's only there for the reyach. V'shereyach zeh nachas ruach l'fnei Hashem. It should be pleasurable. Okay. We're going to come back to this, but those are the halachas in Hilchas Ma'aseh Korban. But the same problem is, why doesn't he mention? He seems to put them together. Same the question of the Mishnah Melech can be asked there. Okay, going back to our halachas, the Markeves HaMishnah comes along and wants to say that this din is also a dayik in the Ram. That Hanachash, if you thought the Lashon Rambam is right, also Lachash lefichach zevach sheshachta shalei l'shmaya mincha shegam shalei l'shmaya bein bezod bein mishgog chayiv lahashlim shar avodas l'shma. So you want to say that's only talking about shinui azevach. But if I change the Bailam, I don't have to continue thinking about the right Bailam, because it's not for him anymore. He's not going to benefit from it. So what do I care? If you're talking about the Korban, I got to still make sure the Korban has whatever milas it has by thinking the proper thoughts or not thinking the improper thoughts. But what about the Bailam is gone? It's like all the Bailam. Devin Odell argues on that. And he says that it still belongs to this Bailam. He didn't lose ownership. And it definitely benefits from bringing for him. It may not be Eilul Bailam Hashem Chayim for this Korban, but it's for him. And he says, why would we allow that? And then he goes to this rule that we said before, that the word Shinui Hashem is a general name for both. Shinui Zevach and Shinui Bailam. Yeah, we'll get back to this discussion because it's relevant to us. The Brisker of asks a million kikash. Rambam uses a lotion that zevach sheshachta shalei l'shma mincha shekam shalei l'shma bein bezodim bein b'shgoga chayiv lahashlim shar avodas l'shma. Whether it's intentional or by mistake. We just got through saying before that if you mistakenly think it's a chatas, it's a shlamim and it was an ayla, it's irrelevant. Doesn't affect anything. So what's the chiddush of the Rambam? Of course, you have to continue. You say you didn't do anything wrong yet. He wants to say that the Rambam is telling you the chiddush that the other way that you're not allowed to. That just stating it as a fact, but it's not really relevant to anything. I don't know. Yeah. The next question is, in the Gemara it said that if you brought a korban and you thought shalei l'shma, the zevach, right, pashtus, or according to others, it means shinui bailam also. You're not allowed to think shalei l'shma later. But the Rambam doesn't say that. And puts his own twist for this halacha. Chayiv lahashlim shar avodas l'shema. Where did that come in? That's not what the Gemara said. And then again, he repeats, and he says that lefichach chayiv lahashlim, and then he writes again. Afilu shachat v'gibol v'oilach m'machshav v'shin Hashem chayiv lizim v'shav v'dachena. Again, he's talking about not the negative, the positive. Where did the positive come out there? That's his own invention, so to speak. And another question is, he made up his own chiddush here, that if you split all three avedas of shachat v'kibul v'heilach shalei l'shma, even so, you got to do the zrika l'shma. Why not? The three is different than one. 3 is it like a majority rules? It goes basarai. What would be the svar? Okay, now this is not a big hara, but if we analyze what he wrote in Hilchas Maisa Kabbanis, so in Halacha Yud Aleph, I'm sorry, he writes, you need to think during Shechita the following thoughts. Straight out. Think about it during Shechita. In Halacha Yud, he first writes that the Oived has to think these thoughts. And then he writes when all these, why didn't he right away? That we all, during these thoughts, by this, you need to think these thoughts, just like he did in the writes Halacha Yud Aleph. Okay, you can say because these are 4, these are 1. I'm not saying this is a question, but it is perhaps an indicator of what the Rambam thinks. And there's a big shine. Thus, that Mishain in the Mishnah has. When he writes, no, this is not, I'm sorry, this is not the Lachem Mishnah. So we'll come to the Lachem Mishnah. This is something that bothers me. In Halacha Yud, where he talks about only Shalei L'Shem HaZevach, Shalei L'Shem HaBailim, he writes at the end, V'im Shochat, V'ovad, Sha'or Avedis Stam, V'lechoshev Klal, if he did it without thinking any thoughts. He didn't think about it, not for the sake of an oiler, and he didn't think of Shalei L'Shem. Harei Ksherim, V'lebailim, why? Because the Rambam Shita is, like the Gemara, that Stama L'Shma. Right? Stama L'Shma. And therefore, he writes that the halacha will be and the same thing he writes again. Just we'll see. Look, we'll get to that. So why did he delineate shchita separately? He should have said v'im ovad. Again, it's not from the questions that if we don't have an answer, we can't get by, because you can say because shchita lav avedas, he has to separate it, but it's not the Rambam style to some, miramas to things that are not relevant here. Okay, so let's try to resolve this with an understanding of what goes on here. The Lechem Mishnah has another deal. And Halacha Yud Aleph, the Rambam spoke about the 6 things that you need to think about. Remember, out of the 6 things, 2 of them are the big ones, and the other 4 are not ma'akiv in general. But right in there, the Rambam has the same words, im shochat stam kosher. That if you did it without thinking, it's kosher. Which seems to tell you that if I thought shaloi l'shem ishim, or I thought shaloi l'shem nachas ruach, Or I thought Shalei L'Shem. I thought any of these things, it would be possible. How can that be? And if it is, like the Mishnah, write about it in Psulei mukdashin. No mention of it in Psulei mukdashin. It's only mentioned in Ma'aseh Abundance. So the Mishnah says the Rambam means only Shem HaZevach, Shem HaZevach, only the Shem HaZevach and the Shem HaBayil. But the Kasha is a strong question. So the Mishnah says, I'm not ridiculous on this. There's an issue which we therefore say a little different, a different halach, but he says, Avade, it's not possible if you think Shalei L'Shema. Why? So we have a rule, Stama L'Shema, means that my kabbanas, kachim, Stama is L'Shema. Yes, it is a Hakira, but I'm not going to get through the Hakira. I'm just going to go what he says to that, because it is true, probably, this approach. That Stama L'Shema means the korban, by its being a korban, is going to be L'Shema. You got to go through the sugya there where the Gemara compares gittin and korban. It's a complicated sugya. It's not for now, but take our word for it. Take his word for it. That's what it means. It means that the hefza of the korban demands L'Shema. It automatically makes it L'Shema. It's holy L'Shema. Now, what happens when you think Shalei L'Shema? It doesn't take away the Stama L'Shema. No Stama L'Shema. He says that the machshava of Shalei L'Shem Bayil or Shalei L'Shem HaKorban, that is for a different korban, is a machshava hapaiseles. It's a din the Torah teaches that negatively affects the korban. It's still Stama L'Shema. It doesn't take away that. It's just a psul. It's a psul. Obviously, by a different korban, it's totally possible. And by most korban, it just takes away the Bailam, the yachas to the Bailam. Oh, if I say, the Rambam has to say, by the other four things also Stama L'Shema. Paket, there, if you think Shalei L'Shema, the reason it still remains Stama L'Shema. The reason it's kashik is Stama L'Shema. And nowhere did we learn that those four are machshava b'selis. So you remain with the Stama L'Shema. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful approach, and it's consistent with a lot of things. The only problem I have is that, according to him, they're all six things are really equal in their requirement. It's just a difference in the machshava b'selis. If so, why do those four things only by shchita and not by the rest? As the Rambam says, only by shchita. And you can't say that the shinui kodesh and shinui bailam are only a psul in the other, but they're not required in the other, because that's not true. They're halacha yudi, so clearly you're required to think about it in all four positively. Again, it's not from the. It doesn't frag up, but it creates an issue, and as we'll see later, I think in Hilchos Psulei mukdashin it would indicate not like that. But we'll get to that. So I would like to suggest that the diuk in the Rambam that he says about the six things when he writes that you need to do them, that he writes first, kol azvachim. Where's the lashon? Kol azvachim tzorich shetehei machshavtei b'shas shchita sa'oila l'shem shish dvarim. And the other places he puts the four things afterwards. Perhaps Rambam is telling us something very strong, that there is a special din in shchita. Shchita requires a total commitment to the purpose of his korban. And it's not a din in all others. This is miyuchat to shchita. That din doesn't apply to zrika, doesn't apply to anything. Only shchita. Shchita requires that. Why shchita? I don't know. But I could suggest that shchita is where the Gemara uses a lashon that the sakin mikat shalei. The whole level of ability to move on is not just because I shechted it correctly, because there's a special kiddush. The sakin is mekadesh, the carbon. The sakin it creates that kiddusha in the carbon that allows it to bring. The Gemara uses that expression in Menachis, Daf Tas Zayin on Beis, and Seita Daf Yindal on Beis. The Gemara uses a lashon Dam Afagav the Kaddish they Sakin B'Tzaver. Then the Kabbalah's Adam is also Mekadesh, but it doesn't really add anything. The understanding is it doesn't add much. It's just another process. But the main Kedusha comes to the carbon. The main Kedusha to the Adam for Hakrova, for Zrika, comes from the Maisa Shechita. So perhaps, for that reason, Shechita requires a total focus on the carbon, at least l'chatchila. Now, why doesn't it pass? But you still need stamel l'shma. Why do you need stamel l'shma? So that my shchita was a kosher shchita if I didn't think about it. Since it requires a total focus on the things the carbon needs, all 6 things. So, but I didn't think. I didn't focus. Stamel l'shma. It's like you focused. Right? It's like you focused. It's as if you focus. In other words, it has in it a focus. So, yet, you need the stamel l'shma, right? So it shouldn't, the shchita, yeah. In order to make the shchita, akasha shchita. You could say also that since machshava shalei l'shma, as we said, does not take away this stuff. Going back to the diuk of the Lechem Mishnah, what about shalei l'shma? Shalei l'shma and the other 4 things will not affect, because as the Brisker said, machshava shalei l'shma doesn't take away the stamel l'shma, so the shechita remains kosher. Except for l'shem hazev l'shem bola. Or you can say a step further. Since those 6 things, or the 4 things really, are miyuchet to shchita. Now remember, we'll talk about Shinei Hashem and Shinei Hazevach. Shinei Hazevach and Shinei Habaylam. Since stamel l'shma is a din in the hefts of the carbon, as we said before. So you can't tell me because my shchita didn't have the right machshava, or I thought the wrong things in shchita, it destroys the carbon. Doesn't destroy the carbon. Because the carbon is still stamel l'shma. So good, my shchita wasn't at the level it should be. But who says that makes it possible? Not a good thought in shchita doesn't make it possible. Oh, but l'shem hazevach, l'shem bolav, there it affects the carbon itself. It's a machshava in the guf carbon. As it's clear from the. In other words, it's not only because it's a machshava is psul, it's a machshava in that affects the guf carbon. If that's the case, so that both l'shem hazevach and l'shem bolav are both negated to the guf carbon. Okay, step 2. I've dealt with this in a different shir in Hilchis regarding Nivgam HaMizbeach, which we talked about there. But there we spoke about the idea that all the Avedis Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, are all a process to Zrika. Their whole being is made for Zrika. It's not that you have four different malachis or three malachis and then Zrika. It's all Zrika. It's all Zrika oriented. Since that's true, could be the Rambam holds that if you do Kabbalah Psulei l'Shem Habayla, it's automatically that the Zrika will be. It's for the sake of Zrika, because that's what Kabbalah is there for. That's what Shechita is there for. That's what Halacha is there for. So it is, and since having the Bailam and the Korban is part of the din of the Korban, then it automatically is considered that I had that it's a chasar in the Zrika. Now, we spoke about Psulei l'Shem Bailam being equal to Psulei l'Shem HaZevach. But we want to talk about what happens if I shechted it for Shimon, thinking it's Shimon's. Betois. What's the halach? Nobody speaks about it. Can't find it. I looked, searched. Encyclopedia Talmudis and Erechatos, he brings from the Zevach Teida, Sefer Zevach Teida Masechtes Vachim, that he writes that Akira B'Toy saying Akira who adin Hashem Shinavai. The only mucker he brings. Now I can't say that because he only brought that mucker, there's no other mucker. But the fact that the Encyclopedia Talmudis is looking for a mucker, can only find the Zevach Teida, no Halacha Sefer, no Rambam, no Aruch HaShulchan or Asud or anybody else. It would seem that that's the only mucker. Perhaps the Rambam does not agree with that and separates like Shinui Bailam and Shinui Kedesh. Shina Azevach. And there could be a logic to it. Although we're saying that both Shinui Bailam and Shinui Zevach are negated to the Etzem of the Korban, but there's a big difference. Shinui the Zevach, the Etzem becomes a Oila. I want to make it Ois Oila by thinking Shlomim. So it's Akira B'Tois. I'm taking away what it is by mistake. It can't be my Akira B'Tois, not Akira. You can't tell me that the Korban Be'etzem is Ruvain, has Ruvain written all over it. Yes, the Ruvain is negated to the Etzem of the Korban, but it's not written in the Korban. The Stama L'Shma is, because since that's who is bringing the Korban, so there is a Stama L'Shma. And the Chefts of the Korban. But you can't tell me that there's a Kedushas Ruvain. There's a Kedushas Eila, but there's no Kedushas Ruvain. So perhaps the Rambam holds us not called Akira. And therefore, Akira don't work, but tell you still. If that's the case, again, we're going to have to be a little broad. When the Rambam says, Bamed Varim Amurim, right, what's he talking about? He's talking about not both. He's bringing, okay, so that there is Shaykh B'Shegig. When? By one of them, by Shinui Bailam. And that's will answer the Briskerov's question. Especially based on the Ibn Azula says that, and seemingly from the word Ram, the Shina Hashem over there is a general word for both. So he's referring Dafka to, in the Shgaga, he's referring to what? He's just saying that if it would be B'mezit or B'shgaga, B'zadan or B'shgaga, where it's Negeya. The Shgaga will be Negeya to Shinui Bailam. Okay, so we're now back to the Halacha Gimel. Why the Rambam doesn't bring the Gemara? So I want to suggest that the Rambam is bringing the Gemara with his first line. Osur lechashiv b'kotshim machshav v'shem necheret. Finish. That's the Gemara. The Gemara is, it is forbidden to think. That means no matter what. The lefichach is the Rambam's own invention. That's not the Gemara anymore. The Gemara is over with. It's also l'chashiv. So who cares what I did before? It's also l'chashiv. I'm not allowed to think about Shem Shem Nechenu. What difference does it make? But the Rambam learns that since it's also l'chashiv no matter what, so not only is it also l'chashiv, it's a mitzvah l'chashiv. The Hilchas Meiser Kabbanis, where it says you got to think the Shema Bailam, the Shema Zevach. I need to continue doing that. So that's why Chayiv lahashlim sharak avodas l'shma doesn't mean the shaloi l'shma. That we took care of. That's machshava shem b'chayda. No, you got to now go back to Hilchas Ma'aseh Kabbanis. That's what he's talking about here, which is another point that seems to negate to the what the Brisker of it said in his pshat. So, and he says that there's a chiyuv that even though it's not being oil l'shem bailam, and it's not going to be oil for the sake of the oil that we wanted, you need to focus back in on the oil and on the Bible. Don't rely on the stumble. You could say, wait, now I can rely stumble l'shma. I don't have to think positively. Stumble l'shma will take care of it for me. No. Even though I missed out on the Kiddush Adam properly, still have to do it. That's why that's first. Now comes along a new Chiddush. We just got through saying Shechita, Kabbalah, Eilacha, all to prepare for Zrika. The preparation was a mess. It was Shalei L'Shma. They're all three Shalei L'Shma. Right? Shachad v'gil Mashem v'shini Hashem, which we said means either Shalei L'Shem, Shalei L'Shem Abba. It says, so maybe if my preparation for Zrika was Shalei L'Shem, why shouldn't I just rely on Stamel L'Shma now? I don't have anything to think about. What am I going to think? Suddenly the Zrika is going to start being Kavan L'Shma. It's not because of Roy, because there is no prep. Ask any cook. Without prep, you can't cook. There's no prep, I can't think L'Shem Bailam, L'Shem Garb. Like the Rambam, no, it doesn't matter. Even though all the achanas were messed up, you can still have a machshava nechayna in the Zrika itself. I want to go back. When the Rambam, we were medayik, and the Rambam used a lashon, I feel is shachat v'ovad, right? We asked, why does he say the lashon shachat v'ovad? Why does he separate them? So we said it's not a kasha because you couldn't answer, but it could be vaite. Because in the shachat, it's a different din than the ovad. Ovad refers to the special shinu Hashem and shinu azavach. The shachat means that there's that has two dinim in it. It has the shinu Hashem and shinu azavach. It also has the general din of all kabbanas. So it could be that's why he separates them. Akobanim, according to this approach, we can at least explain all the issues that we mentioned in the Rambam. Atzlocha Rabbah, have a great day and be well.